If the Terminator could come back in time, couldn't they bring weapons if they just wrapped them in human flesh? Why is it that the Joker wanted to kill Batman? Things we watch, things that watch us, things we hear, things that are listening, the make-believe, the real, and where they intersect. Join me as I offer zero answers, give no advice, and really not much more than maybe a little bit of entertainment. Please, or my mom will call you. Grab a seat. This is the screening of life. And what the hell did happen to the Brady's dog?
I remember walking in the supermarket with you and your sister Danielle. She was maybe in first grade and you were 3 years younger, well, a little less. And I remember the first time you saw a black person was in this store. About 3 men walked by, and I remember you two looked like you were just intrigued. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, it's so new to them. And your reaction was both humorous but kind of upsetting.
It is very fair to say that growing up I was a mama's boy. That's okay. I still am. Now that is in no way meant to dilute the amazing contributions of my loving father. However, there was always a special kindredness with my mom, one that we forged even stronger later in life through a shared recovery from some personal darkness. As far as my struggles with drugs and alcohol goes, it is fair to say that my mother knew what I was long before I did. However, initially, it was a bond strengthened over a love of movies.
Movies for me have always been about lessons. Even though the characters are fiction, they hold us still. They make us hope for them, cry for them, or even laugh with them. Stanley Kramer in The Defiant Ones, Sidney Poitier was Noah, and Tony Curtis was Joker. They were two convicts chained together. One's black, one's white. They had a hate for one another, but their characters in time start to display loyalty and then finally acceptance and a love for one another, which happens to most people in times of survival. The hate becomes dim as the truth brings in the light.
It might be already rather apparent why it is we get along so well. Both of us have a little bit of a flair for the dramatic. Now, I owe my mother a humongous debt. Yes, that is perhaps something a lot of us could say about our mothers. But I don't know if I would be a fraction of the person that I am now had my mother not decided early on that I was going to be the sponge onto which she would attempt to pass a lot of her ideals, that I would be the sounding board for one of her greatest loves in life: fiction. My childhood was riddled with a never-ending barrage of some of the same movies that my mother grew up with. It was a sandbox filled with some of the greats: John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, Charles Bronson, Clint Eastwood. Now these could range from anything from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance to Play Misty for me. Like me, my mother enjoyed films across a very wide spectrum. However, also like me later on in life, there was usually a continuing theme.
I remember having such a crush on Sidney Poitier in the movie To Sir with Love. And yet, I remember my father walking in the room when I was watching it And I was so uncomfortable that he saw me watching it, because it wasn't a subject that we talked about, interracial dating, or, it was just something that I didn't get to talk about with my parents. So, ergo, the reason why I said I want to be open and, teach my children about equality and how important it is to have discussions about it.
In almost all of the pictures my mother sat me in front of, there was typically a strong emotional beat throughout the movie that involved a particular injustice. Due mostly to the time and atmosphere in which my mother was raised, a lot of these conflicts had to do with racism and bigotry. The very first instance in which I can recall being aware of racism was in watching a depiction of it in the movie A Patch of Blue. In the movie, Sidney Poitier plays Gordon. Gordon is just a regular guy who happens to be black. He befriends a young woman, Selena, that just happens to be blind. In the film, Shelley Winters plays Selena's mother to such a level of disgust that a permanent caricature of a racist was tattooed into my young brain. It was not enough to solidify the concept, but it helped greatly for a young mind such as my own to understand that by hating a person simply because of the color of their skin, that meant you were now a bad person. Like I said, I owe my mother a debt. I think that exposure to concepts like racial equality, when steeped in good storytelling, are primed for absorption by a young mind. I am grateful that this did not end with A Patch of Blue. The point was hammered home repeatedly, and my young mind absorbed depictions of tolerance in the face of injustice. I was gleefully indoctrinated into a program of love, acceptance, and goodwill towards all men.
I did have a very strong belief that I didn't want my children to use the word hate. So, as George will tell you, when an emotion would come up and someone said the word hate, I would redirect it and say, oh, we don't hate. We cannot like, but we don't hate. So as adults now, we look back and laugh.
In addition to being brought up to believe that no person was deserving of my hatred, my mother instilled in me the opposing notion that I did not have to like everyone, but that we were all children of the universe, that we were all worthy of love. A few years ago, I was making money by driving for Lyft, while spending the days taking care of my two sons. There was a sense of adventure to it that I found extremely refreshing. I enjoyed it, and I was good at it. I do believe that anyone can do it, and given the willingness to put in the time, make a livelihood of it. However, I do think it takes a certain type of person to actually enjoy it. One night, I had picked up a young black man outside a bar on La Cienega Boulevard. This was a Saturday night, and the streets in Hollywood were as packed as they usually are. I love the frenetic mix of humanity that occupies the inner sanctums of Los Angeles on the weekend. It's an eclectic mix of either people who have been here too long or those who have not been here long enough. A blending of cynicism and optimism. Aaron, my fare, it seemed, was just a nice guy that was trying to get home. After I casually greeted him, I did what I normally do and did the attempted conversation. I'm pretty good at reading cues, and me and Aaron got to talking as I took a dramatic U-turn in the middle of a busy Hollywood street. It was a judgment call, and I made it. the prevailing thought in my mind was, no one was around, and I probably will not get a ticket. A rather dramatic whoa came from the backseat of the car, followed by a shrug and a continuation of the casual way in which we were speaking. I apologized for what I assumed was Aaron's reaction to my U-turn. Aaron informed me that no, it was not that, but that he guesses he just doesn't get to see white privilege in action all that often. There was an initial uncomfort in the air, followed by what was one of the most incredible conversations that I've ever had, and one that I will certainly never forget. Aaron and I spoke about how all the data in my life, which even includes several years of very reckless drunk driving, had indicated at that point to me that I really did not have any reason to fear the police or any potential for interaction with the police. Aaron's experience had been quite different. He had had very few of what he called peaceful encounters with the police. The circumstances of his behavior did not sound radically different from my own. The response by those in a position that is meant to be that of a higher standard was what was radically different.
When I was maybe 11 or 12, I remember the world situation affecting me greatly. I remember there were the 67 riots going on, and I had such a feeling of guilt, or I just wanted to do something. And for me at the time, the answer was, every time I see a black person, I think I'm going to run and open the door for them. And how it was like the answer for me. And that's it. I opened doors and smiled, thinking, it will make everything all right. And it's amazing, the mind of an adolescent dealing with something like racial injustice. But that was the answer for me, making me feel that it'll be all right. Opening doors. And I'm still opening doors today, 50 years later.
At that point in my life, during that conversation with Aaron, I in no way disagreed with the idea of white privilege. However, I do believe that I wholly misunderstood it. I saw it as something that one willingly exercised. More of a fleeting, intangible notion than something that, whether I like it or not, I am engaged in every second of my life. The mere fact that I could make that U-turn, and that the only thing that passed through my potential consequence meter was, I probably won't get a ticket, is an exercising of my profound privilege. The fact that at no point did my mind have to dwell towards, what if the cop gets me out of the car? What if he's a racist? What if I end up getting killed? Is indicative of a deep problem in this country. After my childhood viewings were over, and as I took the role of fiction much more seriously, I started to absorb the films of Spike Lee and John Singleton. These movies were much more nuanced than the caricatures that I had seen as a child. They portrayed redeemable qualities to the antagonists in the story. Likewise, it depicted incredibly flawed characters that we were meant to be rooting for. Art began to imitate life and vice versa. I can recall watching Do the Right Thing in film class in college. As the credits began to roll, my professor snapped on the light suddenly and loudly asked, "So, who won?"
Yeah, no one really wins. We just have small victories. And for me, that means in a moment of eye contact, when I see fear or anger, I smile back. That it will be all right smile. And when they smile back, it's worth everything.
More recently, the work of Jordan Peele has caught everybody's eyes. No less activism than those of his predecessors. However, Peele's approach in movies such as Get Out seems to be to turn the entire conception of racism in modern-day society on its head by continually pointing out how absolutely ridiculous it is. A point of view I agree with. His characters are at once relatable and then entirely repulsive. A look under the mask of what white America is capable of doing from behind closed doors. There are many concepts and challenges to the way I see things that I am willing to entertain. The basic tenets of things like racism, sexism, homophobia, and fundamental human rights are not among them. Part of what these films taught me was how much I need to examine my own bias and my own racism, the concepts that are present, even when I don't want them to be.
Things that are taught when you're young can have an impact on you, especially if you choose not to go beyond them. My father told me a story once. He was drinking, so that's usually when he shared most of his secrets. He was woken up when he was about 7 years old by his mom and dad, and they all had to get together with the neighbors, and they were all handed torches, and he had to join a group of people to go burn out a family that had just moved into his town. A black family. That was his job at 7, to join this group of people and go to these poor people's house and burn their house down to the ground. So you never really know what someone's story is, why they harbor so much hate. It's usually driven by fear. So that little boy in my dad, who was so scared having to do that and not even being able to comprehend what he was doing, stayed with him till he was telling me this story at like 56, 57 years old. Children remember. They truly do.
When it was announced that Marvel's Black Panther was sporting an amazing cast of mostly black actors and being made by a black filmmaker, I celebrated the continuing spirit of inclusion that Marvel Comics has always touted. There are those that took issue with the celebration that ensued in black communities. There are those that chose to take this opportunity to denigrate a communal recognition of a new line being crossed. I recall seeing a commercial for the Black Panther playset around the time the movie came out. What struck me was that the lead actor in the commercial was a young black child. I had never seen that before. Not the lead actor in a commercial. I fondly imagined how amazing it must have felt for another young black child to see that. To be able to play as a hero that actually looked like him. Imagine the narrative being reset for generations to come, as young white children being raised in a home of hatred are able to see someone they are taught is their enemy as a hero. The desire on anyone's behalf to rob a child of such joy and belonging comes from a place that I do not wish to understand. Instead, what I wish to do is take strength from the numerous heroes I have collected in my life. Heroes that have given their strength to us, brought to life by the collected talent of black actors and filmmakers. Heroes that gave to us and never asked for anything in return.
I have a memory from maybe being 7 or 8. My father was very outspoken racially, and a black man from the South moved in next door to us. And my father was outspoken, and he had his wife, who he brought back from Germany after World War II. Well, my father couldn't say a nice thing about him. And he had that southern accent, and he was a handsome man. I remember watching him mow the lawn. And then, of course, change came. My father ended up leaning over the fence every now and then. I'd see the two of them having a conversation. And eventually, my father liked him. And he'd say, I'm going across the street to talk to Bob Alexander. And they became the best of friends. And my father would go over there and have a drink with him. They'd talk about the war together. And he became a kindred spirit to my father till the day he died. So there you go. There's always hope.
I pride myself on having the ability to look past the circumstances in another person's life and see the similarities. But there are some things that I can never see. Now, it may seem trite to make a comparison to the real-world horrors that Black Americans and Black people the world over have to face, to fictional depictions of those horrors. It may seem minimizing to look at the strife in the world and compare it to the strife depicted on the silver screen. However, in doing so, I feel I can become closer to something that I am truly incapable of ever fully understanding. That through the inspiration provided by fiction, I am able to better ally myself in this fight against injustice. That in allowing myself to open my mind to the same experience of a small boy watching the Black Panther vanquish evil in the world, we all can become that much closer to making this vision a reality. I have found kindred spirits in countless depictions of Black men and women over the years. I take strength from all of them. I take strength from Black Panther, from Axel Foley, from Apollo Creed, Agent J, Blade, Storm, Dolores Cannon Cartier, Kunta Kinte, Effie White. I take strength from Benjamin Buford Bubba Blue, from Oda Mae Brown, from Celie, Medea, from Miles Bennett Dyson, Cowboy Curtis. I take strength from Ellis Boyd Red Redding, from Morpheus, Jules Winfield, from Virgil They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, Roger Murtaugh, Nick Fury, Lando Calrissian, Gunnery Sergeant Emile Foley, Winston Zedmore, Jackie Brown, John Shaft, Dolomite Uhura, Captain Benjamin Sisko, Vernita Green, Precious, Mace Windu, Eli, Solomon Northrop, Sheriff Bart, Mr. Myrtle, Rod Tidwell, Mama Odie, Finn, Gail Sayers, Azim, John Prentice, Pompey, Miss B. Haven, Clubber Lang, and so many more amazing works that have helped to solidify that initial belief that my mother instilled in me. I take strength from your exploits and I take guidance from the very real men and women who know this pain in a way that I never can. It is only through recognizing that we are complicit in a several hundred-year-old tragedy that the mere beginnings of growth can begin. It is only through acknowledging the strength, determination, and hopefulness that these characters have brought into my life, because they were black and not in spite of it, that I can remain optimistic that my children will do better than I am doing.
I guess what it all gets down to is you can't lose hope, because hopelessness is the enemy of justice.
There is an outpouring of powerful sentiment right now. A very vocal side is an advocation that what is required in all of this is an abundance of love. I do not disagree with this. However, most of the proponents of this position believe that love is a noun. In this case, right now, it is a verb. Action, and more action, is the only fire that need burn right now. I would ask any of you that cracked a smile at the mere mention of one of those names earlier. I ask all of you, do not take your foot off the gas. Do not lose hope. You are winning. Keep going. Thank you.